Hello, this is Desiree Chappell. It's Tuesday. Welcome to the Roundtable, where we have in-depth conversation with the experts as well as those on the front lines of perioperative care.
Top Med Talk.
I'm Desiree Chappell with Top Med Talk and Professor Monty Mythen, Editor-in-Chief of Top Med Talk. We're at the Royal College of Anaesthetists at Anesthesia 2018 here in London at the British Museum. We have special guest speakers today. We have Dr. Jugdeep Desai. She is the clinical lead for POPs and a geriatrician at Guy's and St. Thomas's here in the UK. And we also have Professor Jennifer Weller, all the way from the University of Auckland, who just flew in yesterday. So I think you're hopefully adjusting well and enjoying so far. We're going to have a discussion about what you all have been talking about throughout the day and what you're going to be speaking on. Professor Weller, we'll start with you. One of the lecture you're going to be giving is working in teams and using a multidisciplinary approach to care. Can you give us first a little bit about your background and then talk to us about some of the topics of interest today?
So my background is in anesthesiology, and I've been an academic anaesthetist for about 10, 15 years, and I think where it all began was getting interested in simulation-based education and the opportunity that brings to engage people in clinical work. So I started off just teaching the uni professional groups, developed a course for anaesthetists around crisis management, working in teams, and I found that the anaesthetists, when they got to play the surgeons, they tended to really ham it up, and I thought we were actually potentially doing harm here because they were producing some very negative stereotypes. So I just got into multidisciplinary team training, so working with whole operating room teams and the different perspectives that you get when you're working together just bridge a lot of those gaps of understanding some of the different languages that we have, different priorities.
Jennifer, were the anaesthetists better team players than the surgeons, or is it not that simple? Is it down to the individuals?
Oh,
it's not. I know it's not a competition.
No, that does sound like we're doing a bit of stereotyping
here.
Yeah,
exactly. I just wanted to flush out that we're not. Are we?
I think we do tend to take a more overview from my observations in theatre that the surgeons get very focused on what they're doing, and it's probably a very good thing. And anaesthetists tend to be keeping an eye out for the whole thing, so perhaps we are more attuned to what's going on in the team, but perhaps.
That's great. Well, speaking of different types of team members and working in a multidisciplinary team, we have Jugdeep here, and you are a geriatrician. And today you were talking about utilization of that profession on the multidisciplinary team. We're talking about perioperative surgical pathways and taking care of the elderly population. Can you give us a little bit about your background and what you're focused on?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical geriatrician working at Guy's and St. Thomas's, which is a large teaching hospital in the middle of London, so just down the road from here. And I suppose the reason why we all got interested in perioperative medicine in particular was because we found that as geriatricians we were being called to surgical wards 3 or 4 weeks down the line from a surgical intervention, when the patient had run into a number of different complications, different specialists, different disciplines, all being involved along the pathway, but maybe each of those specialties really focusing very much on their area of expertise and not really taking the holistic view of what was happening from the patient's perspective and what they wanted to get out of that particular intervention. And so often when we were called, at that point patients had deteriorated, they weren't doing so well functionally, and we were often called to try to help with the rehabilitation and particularly the discharge planning. And not infrequently being asked to kind of take the patient away now because they were surgically fit. And so that really led us into thinking that patients needed a different approach. And really building on the work that you were saying, that it's very much about teamwork and the appropriate people being involved at the appropriate point throughout the surgical journey, but maybe having one team who are keeping oversight from the contemplation of surgery through to discharge and recovery at home or back in the community. And us feeling that maybe that was where we were adding value, that we could see people throughout that whole pathway and be working particularly with our other colleagues in therapy, dietitians, community pharmacists, back with primary care to coordinate that pathway of care. So certainly teamwork kind of being a big part of it.
Yeah, that's great. You were talking a little bit too about shared decision making and bringing the patient in really as part of that team as well. And how is that working for you?
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that actually has been very kind of embedded in geriatric medicine training kind of from the very beginning, really. That's something that we're all very used to doing. So although now we use the term such as shared decision making, actually that's been something that's been part of geriatric medicine kind of from when we all started practicing. So I think what's really important with shared decision making is the fact that it has to occur throughout the perioperative pathway. It's not one single decision that we're talking about. So there's the initial decision around contemplation for surgery and whether that's appropriate. Then there's the assessments and what needs to happen at each point in the assessment around the optimization, and then again reviewing the risks, benefits, potential harms of an intervention once you've optimized patients. And then again, as the patient progresses through the journey, reviewing where we're at, what the patient wants to be achieving from that intervention, and us supporting the team to be able to deliver that if that's appropriate. And of course, there's issues around patient choice, but we need to be providing options which are actually feasible and evidence-based.
Yeah.
That's a very fundamental question, is when do you become geriatric?
Yeah.
Is it a state of mind and body, or is it an age cut-off these days?
So there's two schools of thoughts amongst geriatricians. Some kind of have very much worked on age-based cut-offs, and that's become progressively older as the demographics have changed. And so some units around the country operate on a 75-plus kind of model, others even say 80-plus. In other units, such as ours, we actually base it on multimorbidity and geriatric syndromes. So we'll see patients in their 50s who have that degree of multimorbidity, frailty, cognitive impairment, lifestyle issues that actually biologically are putting them into the same category as the chronologically older population.
Wow, that's it. So the POPS clinic, you said that you were the lead for that. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so it's proactive care for older people undergoing surgery. It's a clinic where we see complex, generally older patients, but we do see people in their 50s. We see patients who are having specific procedures, so all upper GI surgery above the age of 75, all complex AAAs above the age of 60, but then other patients referred to us on the basis of frailty, multimorbidity, geriatric syndromes.
So Jagdeep, we've heard you speak over the years and are very, very impressed by your work, and many of us are trying to adopt the same pattern. But when you talk, it is all about building that team. So we could ask Jennifer on her top tips. I'm guessing you had quite a lot of pushback to start with. Any top tips, Jennifer, on how to get people to embrace the team opportunity, even if it means that someone else is going to be captain, if you see what I mean?
Yes, I think we're talking about slightly different team models here, and you've got a distributed team, and that's really challenging in its own way to get people together when they don't actually need to be together. So you talked before about email communication, and I guess the challenge in surgical teams is that we're actually all in the same room, and even then we might not see ourselves as a team. So the challenge there is, I think, to get those conversations going. I think we've traditionally just focused on training or working individually with our own tasks. We just need to do some of that training, some of that education, some of those discussions together so that we get to know, what each other can do. And so, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know what a geriatrician could offer to the care of a patient until we talk. Until we talk, we don't know. So I think it's part of the problem with siloed education that we've sort of fallen into, that we've got to do something pretty disruptive to get over that now, I think. Yeah.
So how are you, just a final question, teaching kind of our younger physicians, doctors, junior doctors to embrace this care model of that team approach?
Well, we're not just focusing on junior doctors. We're getting everybody, even the geriatrics. So we've got a national program that I got funded from the government insurance company to roll out simulation-based training for all of our operating room staff in the whole country, and that means actually doing training together instead of actually doing operations. So we're actually getting in there. We've got so much commitment to this in New Zealand that we think that doing this is actually going to save the country money in terms of patient adverse outcomes. So that's what we're doing. We're getting everybody together for a morning, working together on simulated cases, discussions, challenging conversations.
That's great.
Jennifer, our experience within our hospital, University College London hospitals, around the time of the rollout of the WHO checklist was driven by one of my colleagues. We did this and it was fantastic. It was really great, and outcomes got better. But somehow in the wake of all of that, if it was a government decision, they weren't convinced enough to do it for the country. They said, well, that was a nice little experiment over there. And then everything went quiet. How did you manage to swing it for the whole country where you are? Is it a size thing? Or?
Yeah, I think it is about personal connections. Yeah. You can get a lot more done in a little country with 4.5 million. I think we've got a really proactive Health Quality Safety Commission, and they were very much pushing the checklist and the quality of the engagement with the checklist, not just a tick box thing. So this sort of is all of one package, trying to build communication and teamwork in surgery to make surgery safer. So I think I guess we got lucky too.
Sometimes it's what it takes.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for sitting down with us here at Top Med Talk at Anesthesia 2018. We really appreciate it and look forward, Jennifer, to your presentation this afternoon. And Jagdeep, thank you so much. It was great speaking with you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Top Med Talk.
Thanks for downloading and listening to Top Med Talk. Don't forget to find us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even got our own YouTube channel. Whichever your favourite social media feed is, we're bound to be there. Find us. Also, subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. And make sure you go to the Top Med Talk website, topmedtalk.com, and get on board with the email updates. Oh, whilst you're at it as well, I suggest you download our entire back catalogue. We're categorising it at the moment. We're having a little look through it. It may not always be in the form that you currently find it. So if you get your hard drive ready for a full-on download via the website perhaps, or perhaps through your podcatcher. Oh, and if you fancy meeting us, why not go to the website ebpom.org/meetings. Our next big event is EBPOM USA, the Dallas Masters Course, a perioperative care practicum. Have a look for details of that and some of the other meetings coming up across the next year. ebpom.org/meetings.